This is Musical Talk.
Musical Talk.
The UK's independent musical theatre podcast.
Musical Talk. The UK independent musical theatre podcast.
What's the point of living if your hand is always steady? If you're comatose already? What's the point of safe? What's the point of sound? What's the freaking point of 2 feet on the ground? What's the point?
Hey there, Musical Talk listeners. Mike Shapiro here. John Kander's name is familiar to most enthusiasts of musical theater, and his music is familiar to even casual fans. Kander was the composer member of a partnership with lyricist Fred Ebb, who together are known for such shows as Cabaret, Chicago, and more recently, the Scottsboro Boys. As anyone familiar with these shows can attest, Kander and Ebb weren't afraid to turn to dark, socially provocative subject matter for their material. Though Ebb passed away in 2004, John Kander remains creatively very active at age 90. In recent years, he's teamed up with lyricist Greg Pierce. Their most recent show, Kid Victory, just closed its off-Broadway run at the Vineyard Theatre. I was lucky enough to chat with Laura Darrell, who played Suze in both the off-Broadway run and the show's earlier production. Laura gave a fascinating perspective on taking part in a brand new show by one of musical theater's old guard. How are you doing, Laura?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me, Michael.
Pleasure to have you here. Why don't we start by having you tell us a little bit about yourself in general and how you got to be involved with the show?
Okay, well, I'm a New York City-based actress, although I've worked a lot in LA too. My name's Laura Darrell. I guess I should have started off first with that. And how I got involved with Kid Victory, well, I studied with Victoria Clark, who's a well-known Broadway name. And several years ago, I guess 4 or 5 years ago, she connected me to David Loud, who is a well-known music supervisor in New York City. He's worked on a lot of John Kander's shows. He's also works a lot with Ahrens and Flaherty. He worked a bit with Sondheim. And so I worked with him for a while, and then he was like, John Kander? I was like, yeah, I know John Kander of him. And he told me that he had just recently written a piece called Kid Victory, and would I like to do a workshop of it? And I started salivating immediately and was like, yes, yes, yes. And then the rest is kind of history. So I've been involved with the project for, 3 years.
You've been with it for the long haul so far.
Yeah, so far I'm the only person to play the role that I played at the Vineyard earlier this year. I also did the show in DC, which was sort of its out-of-town tryout in 2015. And they never fired me. So I kept going.
I have to say that if you're a music supervisor, having the last name of Loud is just awesome.
Yes, it's, actually I never thought about that, but yes.
Is it L-O-U-D or L-A-U-D?
L-O-U-D. It's Loud.
It's almost like his career was chosen for him at birth.
Potentially, yes.
So you anticipated my next question. I was curious if you've been involved with the Signature Theater production, which I guess was 2015, 14, a couple of years before the recent one. Is that right?
2015. It was, it was like a 2-year gap between the DC and then the Vineyard. It was going to come to the Vineyard last year, but then they moved things around and then it happened this year.
Nice. So you've been with it basically since the beginning, and you've got to see it evolve and see the show take shape and perhaps take a new shape as it moved to off-Broadway.
Yes, I was very lucky in that regard. The first workshop that I did, there wasn't even a complete Act 2, so I feel very lucky that I really got to see John Kander and Greg Pierce, his new writing partner. I got to see them work and create, and see Liesl Tommy, our fabulous director, say, I don't know about this. This moment needs something here. And then you would see John just walk over to the piano and just start plunking things out. And now, of course, he's 90 years old, and you're just watching a legend just create something in front of your face. And yeah, I'm incredibly fortunate and lucky, just plain lucky.
I can only imagine what it's like to, on one hand, be in a workshop environment or a development environment where things are changing and nothing is set in stone yet, and you see the show's creators improvising changes. And on one hand, that's, I imagine, kind of relaxing because the pressure is lower because everyone understands that's a work in progress. On the other hand, it's John Kander. So on one, you have both a very informal environment and then the incredible expectations of this living legend working with you.
Yeah, well, he's the nicest, humble, generous man. And so I think the pressure, if there was any pressure, it was self-imposed. I mean, well, it was truly because he loves what he does and he respects actors so much. So just once you get in the room and you've kind of proven that, you have something to offer in that regard, then just being in the room, it was truly creative and free, and you wanted to make him happy, but he was happy the whole time. He just loved seeing the actors and hearing the actors sing his songs. It just proves that you can really be at the top of your field and not be a mean person. You can be a good person and still be very successful.
I'm impressed by that, and I'm also impressed that he's released a show at age 90. I mean, I'll be happy if I'm alive at 90. So that is a great accomplishment.
I know most of us are sort of like, if I'm even still like brushing my teeth at 90, I'll be thrilled. But I really think he will write until the very, very end, and that's so inspiring to me that it never has to stop unless you want it to.
So the official synopsis of the show, and I'm just cribbing from the website and the press materials, is as follows. 17-year-old Luke returns to his small Kansas town after a wrenching one-year absence. As his friendship grows with the town misfit Emily, his parents realize that in order to truly find their son, they must confront some unnerving truths about his disappearance. Now, this is a little bit on the vague side. If you read some of the reviews, you can learn a little bit more about the details of the plot. I'm curious what you can tell us about the story that won't be too spoilery, but might give us maybe a slightly deeper sense of what's going on.
Well, so the show starts with Luke after his 1-year absence, and he went through incredible trauma at the hands of his captor. And he's desperate, he's trying to reassimilate. He's trying to pick up the pieces of his old life, and his mother and father are very eager that he do so, as well as his girlfriend, who I played. But he's struggling to do so because how do you pick up after such a traumatic experience? So the play really focuses a lot on his PTSD and, something he'll be having a conversation with his mother, and then he'll all of a sudden remember something that happened with Michael, his abductor. And so it's about him kind of navigating his way through that and finding himself again and learning what he needs in order to move on with his life. So I hope that says a little bit more.
It certainly does. It sounds like it's about recovery from trauma and trying to rebuild a life after it's been disrupted by something terrible.
Yes. Yep. I know that Greg and John were very interested. They had been reading. There's so many child abductions, actually, unfortunately, in this country. And it's something that not a lot of people want to pay attention to, but it's, like I said, unfortunately, a real thing. And they were curious as to, there was so much media attention, if the children are lucky enough to be found again, there's so much media attention on that, but there's not a ton, a year later with how they're doing. And if there is, because some of them have released books, I know Elizabeth Smart, and if there is, they were just kind of struck by this quality that it felt forced to them. Some of the interviews felt a little almost brainwashed. And they were just kind of like, well, how would you be a year later? Would you be able to would you be successful at picking up where you left off, or would you need to start a new life completely? Would you need to just leave everything behind and start over?
Well, it sounds like rich ground for specifically for a musical story, since the emotions are going to be running high in that kind of scenario for sure. I'm curious if this is based on an existing story or a real-life news story, or is it entirely original?
It's entirely original. It's based off of a couple. They did study real life cases, real children who were abducted, and they did research, but they sort of combined them all together and then created this original piece. They wanted to make sure they weren't doing like an Elizabeth Smart story, or it's definitely an original creation.
Right, to avoid the sensationalism that's associated with particular kidnapping cases.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Correct.
And you mentioned you're playing the protagonist's significant other, is that right?
Yes, his girlfriend, who just was completely thrown off and horrified by his capture, and when he comes back, she's desperate to help him reassimilate, but he's not in a place to do that. And my big song in the show is a song called "I'd Rather Wait," which I'm trying to tell him. He tells me that I should move on, that he's a different person now, and I tell him in response, well, here's how long I've waited for you up until this point. I know you're going through a hard time, but I will continue to wait for you because that's what love is. So it's sort of listening to what he's saying, but really not. And that's the really tragic part of this beautiful ballad that I sing, is that there's so much love for Luke, but I'm unable to listen to him at this point because it really hurts when he tells me to move on after everything that I put into while he was gone.
This is totally a leading question, but how exciting was it to be singing a brand new John Kander song?
Oh my God. I pinched myself every day. It's not only a new John Kander piece, but just a gorgeous song. And it was actually the first song John wrote for Kid Victory. It was the very first piece. And so I think that's kind of special. And then we recorded the cast album right after we closed on March 20th. And I remember being in the recording studio just thinking, I can't believe I'm going on a cast album of a new John Kander musical, singing this gorgeous song that I know girls are going to be singing in the future. It's just too beautiful. And
they may be imitating your recording because you're essentially originating the vocal style and the interpretation of the character and the song.
Perhaps.
We'll see. Now, speaking of music, when we think of John Kander, I think we think about his kind of jazz and vaudeville flavored shows like Cabaret and Chicago. Would you say that Kid Victory's score is cut from the same cloth, or is it stylistically different?
I think stylistically it definitely has elements of the vaudeville and the jazz. But my ballad, for instance, I feel like it's a little bit more contemporary musical theater. He played a lot, I think, with style in this piece. The style kind of went all over, which was really fun musically because it felt like every character had a sound that suited them, suited their emotional journey, as opposed to just kind of saying, this is the style of the complete show. Every character sort of had their own quality. Right. Yeah, I'll be curious to know what you think when it comes out.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to the cast album that you mentioned is in progress. So I'll keep a sharp eye out for that in the weeks to come. Now, interestingly, one of the reviews I read said that the protagonist has no songs of his own. Is that the case? Yeah,
he does not sing throughout the show. That is correct.
That is a very interesting take. It's counterintuitive. We normally expect the lead character to be the one pouring his heart out or her heart out and telling us what's going on from their emotional vantage point. How do you think that How do you think that impacts the audience when the lead character is not singing at all and I presume is attending to songs sung by the characters supporting him?
Well, I don't want to speak for John or Greg, but I'm pretty sure I heard in some interview that they did that their hope is that you get to the end of the musical and you don't realize that he didn't sing until you're walking away from the theater and you realize, oh my gosh, he didn't sing. I can only speak for myself as to why I think it's brilliant. I think you can walk away with many different ideas as to why that choice was made. I personally think it's because Luke is struggling to find his voice throughout the entire show. When someone breaks into song, I think it's incredibly vulnerable and incredibly open in a way. And Luke is not there emotionally, psychologically, and he tries the whole show to speak his truth, and no one is really in a place to listen until the very end. And I don't want to give away the end, but when someone finally is able to listen to him, and then the way it was staged is that you see Luke speaking with this person, but you can't hear him. But the music swells, and you get this sense. At least I got the sense. Again, I should only speak for myself. That there's hope that Luke's going to be okay, and that one day he will sing.
Now, turning to Shop Talk for a moment, it sounded from the promotional videos like there was a live ensemble or a live chamber orchestra. Is that the case? And if so, what was the makeup of the musicians?
There were 9, I want to say. There might have been 10, but I think there were 9. And it was a beautiful little orchestra that we had. It was heavy on the reeds. We had a clarinet and an oboe and did we have an oboe? Bassoon. we had a lot of reed instruments and beautiful violin, viola, cello, bass, and piano and percussion. So it was and a synth. So it was really eerie and just beautiful.
It always makes me happy when there's a live orchestra, even if it's of chamber orchestra proportions, because it does add something.
Yeah, no, it really does. It was crucial, and they're beautiful. And again, singing with them during the recording of the cast album, I was a kid in a candy store because they just sounded amazing.
Now, with a 2-year gap between the original production and the more high-profile off-Broadway show, I imagine there would be opportunities for rewriting the material or adjusting the music. How much development went on between these 2 incarnations of the show?
There was a lot of development. I would say the show at its core had this same sort of, a lot of the material was kept, but there were a few book scenes there were several book scenes that were edited. There were a couple additions to the text, to the book. There was a new duet, but then that duet got taken away. There were 2 new pieces for the male ensemble member, the older male ensemble member. But then the rest of the songs were the same. So it was there were a lot of changes. There were also changes to the set. There was a completely different kind of concept. In the DC, there was a cube, a box in the center of the stage, and that was supposed to be like the room where everything happened. And then the Emily's Lawn Store and all the other locations had their own areas of the stage. And at the Vineyard, the basement Michael's basement took up the entire stage. And so there was no place that Luke was safe. It was sort of like he never left. He's home, but he's not home. I thought it was brilliant.
It's interesting to me how even someone like John Kander, who has living legend status, will iteratively develop a show as it proceeds from one production to the next, and that even the masters of musical theater are not above refinement and reworking. I think that's a very powerful lesson, it's educational for people who are not involved in musical theater except as fans or enthusiasts. But for people who are working in musical theater, I think it's a point of inspiration. Even the masters need to iterate over their creative work.
Yep, and they enjoy it. They look forward to creating, and they're not too. I don't think John was ever too precious with anything. Of course, there were things that he was attached to that maybe Greg wasn't, and vice versa, but they worked together so well to compromise on things and to really honor the story that they wanted to tell. And so there was this one number, Vinland, for instance, that was my cast members and I joke because we say it was like a 20-minute number, but it really wasn't a 20 minute. It was like 9 or 10 minutes. It was a huge, epic number. One of Michael's history lessons, and it ended up getting shaved down to a much shorter number. And I know for a while they didn't want to do that, but then we realized we had to do that. It was just a little too confusing and it wasn't really serving the story. And so music had to be cut. But, you kind of just brush it off. I saw John brush it off and go, okay, well, this is a better story that we're telling here and moving on. And so he never let something like that weigh him down for too long.
Now, the off-Broadway production closed about 2 or 3 weeks ago, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yes. Our last performance was March 19th, and we recorded the album March 20th.
And is there a anticipated future production for the show at this point?
Nothing concrete. I've heard rumors, but I don't want to say what those rumors are because I might look ridiculous. But no, I really haven't. I have no idea. But we're all kind of hopeful because we really loved the piece, and a lot of people really loved the piece. It was disturbing, and I think raw for a lot of people, and some people didn't know how to take it. But then some people were coming up to us afterwards shaking, saying thank you.
Well, it's nice to know that those of us who didn't get a chance to see the show in person will be able to console ourselves with the cast album recording. So for those of us who want to keep an eye out for the show in the future, I see there is a website at the Vineyard Theater. There's a page at the Vineyard Theater website where there's some information about the production that just closed. And I imagine that if we assiduously Google every now and then, we'll eventually find some mention of what might happen in the future. With respect to yourself, if our listeners are interested in finding out more about you or following your future exploits in theater, where can they go online, Twitter, Facebook, website, etc., to find out more about you?
Cool. Well, I'm definitely on all the social media outlets, as one has to be these days. Twitter, my handle, I think, is just at Laura Darrell. Instagram, which I probably use most, is Laura E. Darrell, E as in Edward. I'm not sure what the Navy thing is. D as in Delta. What's E?
I invent my own on the fly.
I do too. My sister's in the Navy, so she would be disappointed that I didn't use the Navy word. But Laura E. Darrell, and then Facebook is facebook.com/the Laura Darrell. That's my page, and then my website is lauradarrell.com, DARRELL.
Well, Laura, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. This was a fascinating look at a very recent, very much living production, and I hope we'll have you on the show again sometime.
Thank you so much. It was a joy to talk with you today.
Take care. During the interview, Laura made mention of a cast album, and you're probably wondering if you can get a sneak preview of that album right here on Musical Talk. And the answer is no. No, you can't. Sorry, I tried. But what you can hear, with the blessing of the producers, is this audio from the show's trailer on YouTube. So until the proper cast album is released, enjoy this little taste of Kid Victory's score.
What's the point of people if you don't let them excite you? Will they for you? Will they fight you, half ignore you, or ignite you? Ooh, how about over there? It's pitch black. What's the point of living if your hand is always steady? If you're comatose already? What's the point of safe? What's the point of sound? What's the freaking point of 2 feet on the ground? What's the point?
People like us will never belong. We sing our own song to people like them. We'll always be wrong.
People like us?
People like us.
Lord, carry me home. It was cold in the storm, but your love kept me warm. Oh, Lord, carry me, Lord, carry me home.
Massive thanks to Mike Shapiro there for this week's episode. Please do check out musicaltalk.co.uk for all our other episodes. Subscribe on iTunes or check us out on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, and we'll see you next week. Thanks so much. Bye bye.